We hear a lot about ancient faiths, but how are they actually taught to students today? Like, what's really in the textbook? Well, in this explainer, we're going to do just that. We're cracking open a grade 11 Islamic studies textbook to see exactly how it presents the core stories, principles, and laws of Islam to a whole new generation.
And that really gets to the heart of our question, right? What does a modern textbook choose to highlight? What concepts does it simplify? And what are the key stories it uses to build that foundation of belief? Let's dive in and find out.
All right, so the textbook kicks things off right where the faith itself does. And it doesn't start with a person, but with a message, a divine message. We're talking about the foundational event of Islam, the very first revelation of the Quran. So these are the very first words the Prophet Muhammad is said to have received. And think about this for a second. The command isn't to fight or to build or to rule, it's to read. That's a really powerful and profound way to start a global faith. And the textbook really frames this as something huge, not just a personal spiritual moment, but a pivotal moment for all of human history. That command to read is presented as the starting line for a brand new intellectual and spiritual chapter for the world. The book sets the scene for us, so picture it. A cave near Mecca, which was a bustling trade hub in Arabia, all the way back in the year 610. And it emphasizes a really crucial detail. The Prophet Muhammad was illiterate. He couldn't read or write. Yet after the angel Gabriel reportedly commanded him 3 times to read, these profound verses just flowed from him. And this is presented as a sign of their divine origin. So who was this man in the cave? Well, the textbook makes a point to build a picture of Muhammad's character before he became a prophet, presenting his early life almost as a preparation for the message that was about to come. And the book highlights a really interesting cultural detail from the time. It was apparently common for city Arabs, like the ones in Mecca, to send their infants to be raised by Bedouin tribes out in the desert. They believed the environment was healthier and that the language spoken there was purer. This was the world Muhammad was born into. And in that world, justice was a huge deal. The book introduces this concept, Hilf al-Fudul. You can almost think of it as a kind of pre-Islamic justice league. It was an alliance formed specifically to defend the rights of the weak and stand up for the oppressed in Makkah. And this wasn't just some abstract idea. The whole thing started because of a real injustice. A merchant from Yemen got cheated by a powerful local. The textbook stresses that a young Muhammad was an active member of this alliance, which helped cement his reputation for justice long before his prophethood ever began. Now, as you can imagine, this commitment to a new way of life created some friction. As the message spread, the early Muslims faced intense persecution back in Makkah. This all led to a pivotal moment that would change everything, a great migration. This journey from their home in Makkah to a welcoming city up north that would become known as Medina is called the Hijra. And it wasn't just a change of address. This was the birth of the very first self-governing Muslim community. And that community was made up of 2 distinct groups. You had the Muhajirun, which means the emigrants. These were the people who left their homes and basically all their wealth behind in Mecca. And then you had the Ansar, the helpers. They were the residents of Medina who welcomed them in. The textbook highlights what happened next as this incredible act of social solidarity. It was a pretty radical new socioeconomic model for its time. A formal brotherhood was set up, pairing each family of emigrants with a family of helpers. And get this, the Ansar offered to split everything they owned, homes, businesses, savings, right down the middle with their new brothers and sisters. Okay, so a community is established. What were the rules? This is where the book shifts from telling the historical story to laying out the ethical principles that were designed to guide daily life and build a just society. A central concept here is nasiha. Now, it's often translated as sincere advice, but the textbook explains it's way broader than that. The word itself carries the meaning of purifying something or even sewing a garment together. So essentially, it means acting in a way that mends, purifies, and strengthens the whole community. So this principle of nasiha shows up in several key teachings. The book highlights that famous idea of loving for your brother what you love for yourself. It also explains the obligation to stand against wrongdoing, breaking it down into 3 levels. Stop it with your actions if you can. Speak out against it if you can't. Or at the very least, hate it in your heart. And finally, it stresses absolute honesty in business. No cheating, no deception, and no hoarding goods to artificially drive up prices. And it's kind of cool. The textbook often pairs these principles with artwork, using visuals to make the lessons more memorable and engaging for students. Another core belief explained in the book is al-Qadar, or divine will. The textbook defines it really simply as the power of Allah. The idea is that since God is in control of everything, including your lifespan and what you have, a believer can face hardship with a strong heart, knowing that their destiny is ultimately in God's hands.
This brings us to the final and really crucial section. I mean, the revelations happened 1400 years ago. So how does this ancient message apply to life today? Well, the answer lies in a living tradition of interpretation.
After the Quran, the second main source is the Hadith. The textbook describes this as this huge body of literature that records the sayings, actions, and approvals of the Prophet Muhammad. These accounts provide the essential context you need for understanding the Quran's verses.
But the question is still there. How do you take a 7th century text and apply it to a 21st century problem? Well, that's the job of something called Islamic jurisprudence, or fiqh. It's basically the methodology for deriving legal rulings.
And the textbook lays out a clear 4-step process scholars use. First, they always start with the most direct source, the Quran. If there's no explicit answer there, they turn to the example of the Prophet in the Hadith. If the issue still isn't resolved, they look for the ijma, which is the consensus of past scholars. And only for truly new issues do they use the 4th tool, qiyas, or reasoning by analogy. The book gives a perfect, super easy to understand example of qiyas. The Quran explicitly forbids alcohol. But intoxicating drugs, like the ones we have today, didn't exist back then. So scholars use analogy. They determine the reason for the ban on alcohol is its intoxicating effect. Therefore, by analogy, other substances that cause that same intoxication are also forbidden. And that brings us right back to our big question. How can an ancient text guide modern life? The answer this textbook provides is clear. It's not about a static, frozen-in-time document. It's about a dynamic process of interpretation, built on a structured and very much living tradition.